Welcome to Cooking to Feast. Today, we're taking some of these tomatoes and cheese and pepperoni, and we're making Sicilian Style Pizza. This one is gonna be good. So to start off with, we're gonna be making a dough. You see the ingredients there. We're gonna be making a sauce from scratch, and this is important, along with the dough. And then mozzarella, pepperoni, parmesan. Of course, you do whatever toppings you want. I'm gonna go over pepperoni. So we're going to start by making our dough by getting our water ready, measuring it out to 309 grams, and then add our yeast to it. This is going to help to see if the yeast is alive and if it'll bloom. So whisk it up into our container, and I'm doing a couple different demonstrations at the same time. And while that's blooming, we're going to measure out our dough. It's important to measure out because we're trying to get a 57% hydration, and the amount of water in the dough changes the properties of it. So this is what I'm going for. And of course, when I try to get the shot, it goes up by 1 gram. In addition to the flour, we're going to add some salt to it, give some flavoring here. You'll see that I'm doing some heaping pours into there, and that's because I'm using kosher salt, and there's a lot of air in between because of the big grains. So just a little bit more than the 2 teaspoons. I'm also going to be adding our sugar to it. This is going to help give a little flavor, but it's also going to help with some browning. So here's our yeast. It's blooming. That means it's good to go. If it doesn't bloom, don't use it. Mix it up, and I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways. Food processor on the left, and then the KitchenAid on the right. Once your dry ingredients are mixed up, add your yeast water to it. And you're going to combine it just long enough to get this kind of shaggy mixture. On the food processor, this might be like 10 to 20 seconds at most. And take a look at it. You got these little chunks, but once you put any pressure on them, they come together into an actual dough ball. On the KitchenAid, you'll see here, we've got a shaggy dough here. And what's next is we're going to add our olive oil. This is one of the best parts of the dough, is the olive oil flavoring that it provides, and it's going to help with the stretching later on. Along with the olive oil is going to help with it, give it a kind of focaccia feel to it that the Sicilian style is famous for. So let's go back to the food processor here, and you're going to combine it. About a minute to 90 seconds is probably all it's going to need. It goes by pretty fast until you have an actual dough ball here. In the KitchenAid, probably going to take about 5 minutes with the dough hook, beating it together. And you're going to be looking for certain characteristics when it's done. I know this isn't done because it's still a little too shaggy and it's kind of ripping apart instead of pulling apart, but the famous test is to get a little chunk and do the window pane test. If it can stretch enough so that it's thin enough that light comes through and you can see your fingers, then it's done. That ripped, so it wasn't. So I'm going to give it another minute or 2, and you'll see it's already much smoother. It's a lot smoother than it was, and that's a good indication that the gluten has done its job and is going to stretch really well. Now take a look at it. It's not ripping, it's stretching really well. Of course it will rip if you stretch it too much, but let's take a little chunk and let's try the test again. You can see it is stretching quite well. You can see my fingers going through it, and now let's put it under the light. You can see the light through it. That's the other part of the window pane test, is to be able to see light through the dough. So that means it's done. It means it's gonna go, and it's going to stretch nicely and rise nicely. So let's oil up a bowl, and we'll get our dough ball out of here. Don't put it directly in there. We want to form it into a ball. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but what you're trying to do is stretch the outside and kind of bring it together into the bottom and then crimp it off. This is so when the yeast, it eats and produces CO2, it'll get trapped in the strains of gluten in here, and it'll actually cause the dough ball to rise. And so that's why we want a tight exterior on it, so that we trap it in there. It rises nicely and gives it the good stretch that we want. Another indicator that your dough is good is to lightly poke into it, and it springs back. It'll take a second to get all the way back. That's a good indicator that your dough is a nice consistency. Now go ahead, put some wrap over it, and you're going to want to put it into cold ferment it for a night or 2. If you don't do this step, it's not going to taste as good. You're used to that flavor. I tell you, you go to a pizza place, you're used to tasting cold fermented dough. So here it is the next day. Nice and puffed up. You want to see how much it puffed up? Well, let me put my fist into it. Yep. Look at that. It doubled in size at least. That's what you're going to do. You want to deflate it. We're going to let it come up to temperature. So I've actually been setting it out for a couple hours, making sure the dough gets nice and warm. And so today we're going to be using an 18-inch sheet pan. This is kind of the commonality of the Sicilian style at home. And you're going to want to cover it in olive oil. And this is what's going to get the nice crispy crust on the bottom of it. I'm going to take the dough here and I'm going to kind of try to pre-stretch it a little bit. It's still kind of cold and it doesn't really want to stretch really well. But I'm going to let gravity kind of stretch it out a little bit before I put it on the pan. Doesn't look anything special at this point. But first thing you want to do is make sure you get olive oil all over it. And it seems like a lot. No, it is a lot, but this is part of the style of this pizza. You're not going to get the nice browning and crispiness if you don't. And it tastes good. I mean, it's kind of got that focaccia flavoring to it. If it doesn't stretch out well, just leave it for 30 minutes and let it rest, like I've done here. Now you can see it's stretching a lot nicer. The gluten is relaxed. If it's not stretching well, leave it out for 30 minutes, cover it up, and then come back and try again, and then stretch it out. Try not to get any thin spots and try to keep it even. You can kind of mold it a little bit, and this is what you get. So while that's kind of just hanging out and re-aerating, we're gonna make a sauce. You let it like kind of set out while you're making your sauce, and it's gonna puff up a little bit. So for the sauce, I'm gonna start with 6 garlic cloves, or more or less, depending on the size of them. I like a lot of garlic. You can adjust it to your own taste. I don't feel like chopping it up and I want a fine texture on this, so I put it in my little processor. Take a look at that. Nice little small pieces. I want them to kind of almost disintegrate into the sauce while it's cooking. For this, we're gonna have some basil in there, and I got 4 leaves here. You can adjust to your taste as well, but I find that 4 leaves taste good. So I'm gonna put it in my saucier here, and we're gonna get it up to temperature, medium heat. Let's get a little more olive oil in there so we don't stick to anything. And stainless steel does a great job here. These Meissons pan, great job with the tomatoes and everything that I wouldn't put in cast iron. And I've been kind of slowly going away from any of the non-stick stuff. So let's get that in there and cook it for 1, maybe 2 minutes at most. You don't want this to cook and get bitter. So while it's in there, immediately get your tomato paste out and start putting it into the garlic. I'm going to mix it up into the garlic here with a spatula and get it nice and coated, and the heat will help with the flavoring of the tomato paste. Work fast, get everything out because we don't want to burn the garlic. The seasonings I'm using: sugar, pepper flakes, salt, Italian seasonings. Pepper flakes here is your choice of how spicy you want it to get. Traditionally, or at least if you're looking at the Prince Street Pizza kind of Sicilian, they do use a Fra Diavolo sauce, if I'm saying that right. And that is a spicy, like marinara. So if you want it to be spicy, go ahead, add more red pepper flakes to it. And then here to the star, the canned tomatoes, whole canned tomatoes and the basil. Try to get the nicest one you can. I mean, you've probably heard that a bunch of times, but all tomatoes aren't equal. And for this, just bring it to a boil, and more or less, it's done cooking at this point. I want it to be a nice, like more fresh tasting sauce, because it's going to spend like 30 minutes in the oven. And I like a fresher taste than more of the cooked down taste. So this is up to you. Cook it the way you want to. But at the end, I like a smooth sauce, so I'm going to process this up. Prince Street Pizza uses a very heavily cooked down sauce from the videos I've seen. And just one disclaimer, I'm not making a Prince Street Pizza if you come here from that kind of like copycat, because I've never had it before. Hopefully one day I will, but for now I haven't. So pepperoni, I suggest using with a casing on it and cutting it yourself. It's more work, definitely is, but the end result, you get these nice little like crisped up cups, and that is a much better texture and taste. The mozzarella cheese, you're gonna want to use dry mozzarella, preferably full fat content and not skim, but use what you can. I recommend using 1 pound of cheese and slice it into these like deli slices. Now, kind of like a lot of cheese, so I'm gonna go crazy on one of these and do 1.5 pounds of cheese. And you'll see, it'll be a lot of cheese. It'll be probably too much. So 1 pound is probably what you want to do if you want a nice looking pizza, a modest pizza. Now that your dough is puffed up a little bit, and we're gonna put the cheese down. And it's just put a layer of cheese down. This is gonna help prevent the sauce from getting wet into the dough, and you're gonna get a better rise. Then you're gonna wanna put your racing stripes down. Have you ever heard of like the Detroit style pizza? I'm putting like 3 big lines of sauce down it, and this is gonna help on top. It's gonna mix with the cheese and be good. Put some Parmesan down and then cover it in these pepperonis. I wanna show you the difference between sliced pepperoni, pre-sliced pepperonis, and the ones that you can get from the actual sticks. And you're gonna see a difference on these. They still taste good, but for these, I'm using the pre-sliced ones from the same brand and everything. But you're gonna see a difference. And then finally, let's put some more Parmesan on this. This is pretty much ready to go. Hopefully your oven's been preheated for as hot as it'll go for 1 hour already, getting your stone nice and hot. I suggest using a stone because it's gonna help the thermal transfer to the sheet pan. And here we go, another lapse here. If you want the less artistic view of it, dough, cheese, sauce, Parmesan, toppings, more Parmesan, and it's ready to go. So my oven's been set to 525 because that's as high as it'll go. It's been going for an hour. Boom. I baked it for 30 minutes. And this is what you get. This is just straight baked. Put it in there for 30 minutes, and this is what you get. Pepperonis are looking good. Cheese and sauce all kind of mixed together, and the crust rose nicely, or the dough rose nicely. You got some of the spotting on the bottom, but it's really soft dough here. You can see how easily it just kind of lifts up. And every oven's different, and I don't have a pizza oven, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but this is your basic Sicilian right here. Or at least the one that, started at New York and kind of became famous here. Nice amount of cheese. I mean, I went overboard on this first pizza. Look how much cheese that is. It's crazy. And look at pepperonis, nice sauce. See how it mixes and it makes a topping on top of the cheese. And then this is after it's cooled down, you can get an actual nice little cross section there. Crust, cheese, sauce, and toppings. It is delicious. Nice soft dough. Fantastic. But here's some other options because every oven isn't the same. One option is you can pre-bake your crust. So you take a look at this. I baked it for about 10 to 15 minutes, and you get this spectacular looking piece of bread here. See how it's not as flexible as the other pizza here. Got a nice spotting on the bottom of it, and it holds its shape well. Well, you do that, you pull it out, you do the rest of it. You cover it in 1 pound of cheese, put your racing stripes on there, put your cut pepperonis, and then some Parmesan. So let's throw this back into the oven for about 10 minutes, maybe 15, long enough to really melt the cheese and get it real hot. And then pull it out, and this is what you got. Notice how it cuts a lot easier because of the rigidness of the crust. The only downside to this is that you don't get enough time for the cheese and the sauce to really meld together like in the other one. But look at this crosscut here. Clearly defined, cheese looks good, the crust looks good. So what's the most important to you? I think you're gonna get an enjoyable product out of either one, but if you like that more thick crust on there, this is probably a better method for you. So let's take a look at a third. It's kind of like a compromise in between the two. We're going to finish this one on the pizza stone. So we get everything on there, the fresh cut pepperonis and everything, but I'm going to use this large carbon steel griddle this time to try to expedite the process. I'm going to put it directly on the pizza stone, just like I've been doing for every other process here, and we're going to bake this for about 20 minutes. You can see from the carbon steel, it's already starting to get a nice char in the pepperonis, and the crust is formed and solidified. So we're gonna carefully remove this and put it directly onto the stone. You notice the pizza's a little bigger than my stone, so there's gonna be some overlap on the edges there. And we're gonna cook this for another 10 minutes or so. Maybe less, depending on your oven, of course. That is going to absolutely crisp this up. And look at the pepperonis on there. This is what I'm most happy with. And I can tell you, this is where you're gonna see the big difference between the pre-cut ones and the ones that you cut with the natural casings. Look at that. That is my favorite looking pizza of them all. They all pretty much taste the same ingredients wise, but the dough is much different on each of them because of the baking method. Look how good that the pepperonis look. Look, we have a lot of structure to this, and the pieces that were overhanging a little bit got directly exposed to the oven coils, but they still taste good. It's still soft in the middle, but it's really crisp on the outside. Take a look at that. Real defined crust. You got your layers of cheese and then pepperonis that curl up, and that's the best ones there. If you're a pepperoni lover, you got to get these type of pepperonis and cut them yourself. The fact is, they all pretty much taste similar, like I said, except for the crust here. So I got 3 different methods for you to decide. How do you like your crust? Do you like it a lot softer? Do you like it with some good crisp? Or do you want to go all the way out like this, like I love here, and then pile it up and then get some indigestion? Because it's worth it. I made like 12 pizzas getting this right, so I'm really confident about this one. So this is Cooking to Feast, Sicilian Style Pizza. I hope you enjoyed, and subscribe for more.